Not all heroes are human, but some dogs are legends. At a forgotten auction in Montana, amidst mocking laughter and scornful eyes, a German shepherd was dragged out like the last piece of worthless junk from storage. Its back was scarred, eyes sunken, muzzle clamped in cold iron. People called it insane, a breathing corpse, and no one placed a bid. Until one man stood up. He didn't speak, didn't ask a question. He simply raised his head, looked straight into those seemingly lifeless eyes, and nodded. From that very moment, two broken warriors began a journey to heal one another, and unknowingly unearthed a military secret that had been buried for nearly a decade. The flickering fluorescent light overhead cast a sickly pale glow across the concrete floor, as if the entire room was dying alongside time itself. The auction had started late, held inside a decrepit warehouse tucked at the edge of Red Pines, a town where even time had seemingly moved on. No sign, no name, just a termite-ravaged wooden board hanging crooked at the entrance. Surplus stock, public auction, today. People came here for all kinds of reasons, some out of boredom, others chasing the hope of scoring a bargain from the forgotten. Stray cats, limping goats, even a few weathered old horses. But today, the thing that drew the most attention wasn't price. It was a pair of dead eyes, sunken and lost in the center of the floor, as if the soul behind them had already left long ago. A German shepherd, or what was once one, lay curled in the shadows. Its once proud coat was now patchy and dull, barely concealing the sickly gray skin underneath. Its ribs jutted through its sunken abdomen like bones carved into stone. Eyes half closed, ears drooping. It didn't respond to voices, to clanging metal, not even to the mocking whistles from the crowd. "That thing? You're really putting that up for auction? Is that a dog or a zombie? I thought they just dug it up from a graveyard." The laughter came in scattered bursts at first, then spread like a virus of ridicule. The auctioneer, a middle-aged man with a loose tie and a sandpaper voice, clapped 3 times to regain control. But his eyes lingered on the motionless dog, with something close to discomfort. "Next lot," he said, forcing the words out. "Male German shepherd, approximately 6 years old, no papers, reportedly served in a military environment." A few heads turned, curious, skeptical. A military dog? That might fetch a decent price. "Condition," the man hesitated, glancing down at the report in his hand. "Deemed untrainable, shows signs of aggression, eats only when left alone, unresponsive to commands, and—" he swallowed, voice tightening. "Scheduled for euthanasia today, if unclaimed." A strange silence unfurled like a cold mist. The ceiling fan whined softly. Then a voice snorted from the back. "Mad dog, useless. I wouldn't take it for $50. Another chimed in. "Damaged goods, my man." "That ain't a dog. That's a corpse with fur." The laughter came again, harsher this time, longer, as if the creature's mere existence insulted the species it once stood for. Someone casually tossed an empty can at it. It rolled across the floor and tapped its paw. No reaction, no twitch, no breath of resistance. The auctioneer forced a weak smile. "Starting bid, $50. Anyone?" Silence. 1 second, then 2, then 10. He was about to lower the gavel and call the lot unsold, when a chair scraped across the concrete with a loud metallic screech. All heads turned. A man had risen in the back row. He wore a faded navy blue field jacket, worn by time and wind. His face was hidden in the shadow of the overhead bulb, but his jawline looked carved from stone. His hands, scarred, thick, were more familiar with triggers than pens. "I'll take him," he said. The voice wasn't loud, but it hit the room like a thunderclap. No one laughed. His eyes met the dog's, a gaze between a man who had survived and a creature who had died on the inside. And in that moment, they saw each other. They recognized each other. Time froze around the words, "I'll take him." A hush spread through the warehouse like fog. Heads turned toward the man who'd risen like a ghost from the corner. Under the yellowed light, the faded blue jacket came into focus. On the left breast, stitched in frayed gray thread, the letters were still legible. U.S. Navy. Caleb Merrick didn't speak again. He just stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes locked on the dog in the center of the floor. His face was unreadable, tough, but tired like a man who carried every sleepless dawn from a battlefield far from here. Sorry, what did you say?" the auctioneer stammered. Caleb stepped forward. Chairs scraped out of his way instinctively. He didn't carry a wallet, just reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a wad of crumpled bills, held together by a rubber band. He set them on the table like a man settling an old debt. "I'll pay the asking price, $50, no bargaining." "Are you sure? I have to warn you." "No need," Caleb cut in. His tone was calm, level, but something in it made interruption impossible. "I know what I'm doing." Again, every eye turned to the dog. Echo didn't move. But if you looked close, really close, you'd see the slightest twitch in its eyelid, a motion barely more than a whisper. Its ear flicked faintly, as if something familiar stirred in that voice. Caleb crouched down, one hand resting on his knee. He didn't lean in, didn't reach out, just stayed at a distance close enough to matter, far enough not to threaten. "You hear me?" he asked, voice low and gravelly, like someone rediscovering how to speak gently. "My name's Caleb. I'm not here to break you. I'm here to take you home." That line wasn't meant for anyone in the room, but it was the one that shut everyone up. Echo opened his eyes, slowly, very slowly. But for the first time since entering this place, he looked at someone, and in that gaze there was no abyss, only a flicker, a coal not yet cold, a survivor's ember. That wasn't the look of a broken dog, it was the look of a soldier. The auctioneer slid a form across the table, a standard liability waiver, stamped in bold red, "Dangerous, untrainable, muzzle and heavy leash, recommended." Caleb didn't read it. He signed it, without hesitation. "You got a vehicle?" "Yeah." "You'll need help. That one doesn't exactly follow." Caleb shook his head. He accepted the old leather leash-worn, cracked, a relic from Echo's former life, then turned toward the dog. No one moved. No one spoke. The man's boots echoed across the concrete, steady, unhurried. He stopped in front of Echo, didn't reach out, didn't lower himself too much. He just sat, quiet, still, present. A draft slipped through a side door. The old metal groaned as it swayed, and in that moment, Echo inhaled, as if testing whether this air was real. Caleb didn't budge. "I'm not a vet, not a trainer," he murmured. "I'm just a guy who's been where you've been. I don't know what they made you do out there, but I know what it feels like to be left behind. 1 minute, then 2. Echo blinked. His head tilted, his front paw rigid with trauma unclenched just a little. Caleb still didn't touch him. He didn't need to. The bond was forming, not from treats, not from commands, but from a truth too deep to say aloud. I'm broken too, just like you. The warehouse door creaked open with a long, rusty groan as Caleb pushed it wide. Sunlight spilled into the parking lot, golden and bitter. The sun hovered low behind the western ridge, its glow beautiful in a way that almost hurt. A cruel contrast to the coldness they had just left behind. His silver-gray pickup waited at the far end. The bed had been cleared out, lined with an old thick blanket. Not in preparation, just habit. A habit from someone used to making space for things that didn't belong anywhere else. Caleb walked beside Echo, the worn leather leash loose in his grip. The dog followed like a ghost, silent, weightless. But when they were only a few steps from the truck, Echo froze. Paws locked to the gravel, ears sharpened, body tight. Caleb stopped immediately. Didn't pull, didn't command, just waited. Echo stepped back, once, then twice. He growled low, not from rage, from something older, wilder, terror. His eyes darted around, searching for escape. His body trembled like memories were crashing in all at once. The truck, the cargo bed, the metallic scent, the echo of slamming doors, the feel of syringes, of being caged, of being left behind. To Echo, that bed wasn't a ride home. It was the last ride any dog took. Caleb saw it. He didn't speak, didn't coax, didn't sugarcoat. He simply knelt, unclipped the leash, folded it, tucked it into his pocket. Then he turned away from the truck and sat on the ground, back against the front tire, one knee up, breath slow, like he'd just dropped the weight of something unspeakable, something no one had ever asked about. "I won't force you," he said quietly. "If you need to walk away, walk. I won't stop you." Echo stood a few feet away, still locked, still staring, waiting for what came next. But Caleb didn't move. He just waited. The way people wait for rain in a drought. No guarantees. But hope, nonetheless. Time no longer passed by clocks, only by changing light. The sun dipped behind the pine ridge, bleeding amber into soft blue. The wind cooled. The scent of damp earth and pine resin swirled with the faint rust of dried blood still clinging to Echo's throat. Caleb didn't shift, didn't flinch. Now and then he spoke. Not commands, not advice, just stories. "I had a dog once, back at training camp. Name was Rook. Not a service dog, just a mutt that hung around the fence line. I fed him a few times, then he never left." Silence. Day I shipped out, I couldn't take him. Orders. You get it. A breeze swept in. Caleb dipped his head. I still don't know if he made it. Off in the distance, Echo had stopped growling, still rooted, but no longer tense. Tail low, ears relaxed. A minute. Then 2. Caleb didn't turn his head, but he heard it. The faint scratch of claws against gravel. So soft, like a breath at the end of a long sleep. Echo stepped forward, paused. Then another step, and another, closing the gap. Caleb felt the heat of breath behind him, but still didn't look back. Just rose slowly, walked to the rear of the truck, flipped the blanket open. It's just a truck bed. No cages, no needles. No one's waiting to put you down. Echo looked at him, And this time his eyes weren't empty. They were calm, still, like the surface of a quiet lake, just enough to reflect a man standing in it. And then he jumped in, not fast, not fully trusting, but with intent. Caleb closed the tailgate gently. No bang, no slam. He climbed into the cab, started the engine. The wind slipped through a cracked window, carrying the scent of pine and old roads. In the rearview mirror, Echo didn't lie down. He sat, still rigid, still alert, but not looking for an escape. He stayed, and the journey home, to a place neither had ever known, finally began. The first morning at the apiary began with the hush of wind threading through tall pines and the soft flutter of bees' wings brushing against the glassy stillness of a world not yet awake. Sunlight pierced the thin mountain mist, spilling over wooden hive boxes that lined the slope where Caleb lived alone, with only bees, a few worn books, and memories he never intended to revisit. The tailgate of the truck still hung open from the night before. Echo hadn't moved. All evening, Caleb hadn't forced him down. He'd pitched a small tent just a few feet away, lit a fire, made coffee, ate simply, and read from a tattered notebook until late into the night. No talking, no coaxing, just presence. At first light, he stood, brushed the dust from his hands, and said quietly, "Come down when you're ready," then turned his back and left the door to the house ajar. Echo stepped into the house on his own legs, not out of trust, but because silence that didn't threaten was sometimes easier to bear than the sharp commands he once obeyed in some forgotten training camp. Caleb's cabin was modest, but warm. No TV, no radio, only the creak of old wood and the slow rhythm of a man boiling water in a kettle. Echo moved like he was crossing glass. Every soft click of his claws on the floor startled him. When a metal pot lid clanged on the counter, he yelped, jumped back, hit the wall, and braced, as if expecting a blow. Caleb glanced, then kept making tea. No shout, no scolding, no sudden movements. He placed a bowl of water by the threshold, neither fully inside nor out. Beside it, an old ceramic dish, half filled with soft food, not appetizing, but enough to survive on. Echo didn't eat right away. He just stood there, ears up, eyes scanning. Every sound, the buzz of bees drifting past the door, the pop of wood warming in sunlight, set him on edge. PTSD doesn't only haunt humans. It was etched in every trembling muscle of this dog, in every sharp glance, every overreaction to noise. Echo wasn't a stray. He was a soldier trained, drained, discarded now, little more than a ghost surviving on reflex. Caleb watched, didn't approach, didn't call his name. He moved slowly, deliberately, just enough to show he was there, but not a threat. When he sat by the window trimming lavender stems for the hives, Echo finally crept forward. One paw, then another, sniffed the bowl, lapped the water once, then retreated. Caleb said nothing. As the sun climbed, Caleb stepped outside. He didn't bring Echo, didn't close the door. He let him choose. By the western hives stood an old kennel once home to a rescue dog Caleb had lost during a wildfire evacuation. He opened it, lined the floor with fresh dry hay, laid down a worn wool blanket, and paused for a long moment, as if honoring a ghost. When he turned, Echo was at the edge of the porch, head tilted. Caleb didn't wave, didn't coax, just rested his hand on the kennel door and spoke loud enough for the wind to carry. "No locks, just a place you can sleep without needing to watch your back. The afternoon passed in silence. Caleb repaired a rotting hive frame. The soft hammer taps echoed in the sunlight. Echo lay nearby, not too close, not too far. Eyes open, ears alert. Each time the hammer struck too loud, he flinched, but didn't run. Instead, he looked at Caleb, then looked away. It wasn't trust, not yet, but maybe a trial run at belief. By dusk, he entered the kennel and laid on the blanket. Didn't curl up, didn't sleep, just lay still, facing the open door, eyes deep and quiet, like a well untouched for years. Caleb walked past without a word, just murmured gently, like a whisper carried on bees' wings. No orders here, only choices. And Echo, a dog without a name, without a rank, chose to stay. A silver SUV rolled slowly down the dirt road toward the apiary. Wind tugged at the black hair of the woman behind the wheel, whipping it across her neck, but she didn't tie it back. She was used to looking forward, no matter the wind, the dust, or the ghosts. Lila Chen didn't wear a lab coat. She stepped out in dark jeans, a linen shirt, and a large canvas satchel slung across her shoulder. She looked like a hiker, but her eyes, calm and seasoned, told a different story. Caleb was trimming dry branches behind the cabin. He glanced toward the sound of her car, then nodded. "Thanks for coming." "You rarely call," she said, smirking. "Even less so for favors. This one's not like the others." Lila nodded and opened her bag. "Where is he?" Caleb tilted his chin toward the edge of the yard. Echo sat beneath the shadow of the kennel, still, not sleeping, not entirely relaxed, but no longer panicked, like a soldier relearning how to breathe. Lila approached carefully, like crossing a live minefield. No sudden movements, no prolonged eye contact. She sat down, set her medical bag gently on the ground, opened the lid a crack. Echo watched, ears raised, no growl, no retreat. Caleb stood at a distance, an unspoken signal that the woman meant no harm. "Hey there," Lila said softly. Not sweet, not exaggerated, just matter of fact. "I'm a doctor. No needles today. Just a look." She extended a hand, palm up, letting Echo decide. After a long silence, he stepped forward, nosed her hand cool and dry, then stepped back. A silent agreement. Just once. She began. Ears, eyes, joints, routine checks, but her eyes scanned deeper. A crescent-shaped scar behind the skull, patchy fur loss uniform circles, tense tendons like they'd once been strapped to hardware. She lifted the fur beneath his skull base, tilted her head. "Caleb?" "Yeah? You ever seen incisions like this?" He stepped closer. His gaze darkened. "Not on dogs. On people. Yeah." Lila paused, fingertips gently brushing the bone just behind Echo's ear. He jolted. His whole body tensed, eyes wide, white-rimmed like lightning had struck a nerve. He backed off, didn't growl, but bared teeth. An instinct, not a choice. Lila didn't flinch. She nodded slowly. "He was implanted." Caleb's brows furrowed. "Implanted? With what?" "Some kind of stimulus response device. Neural trigger. Could have been used for tactical reaction enhancements or behavioral override. That tech was banned a decade ago." She nodded. Her voice lowered. "On paper, yes. But you know how black projects work." Caleb's fists clenched. "So he wasn't just a military dog?" "No. He may have been part of a special program. high tier, possibly Titan. Echo sat a few yards away, panting, ears low, eyes unfocused, staring at something invisible and terrible carved deep in his memory. Would explain why he won't eat around people, Lila said, why he reacts to metal, and why he looks you in the eye and never looks away. Caleb said nothing, but his gaze shifted, no longer just sympathy. Now, a sense of debt, like staring into a memory he thought he left buried under desert sand. "He remembers," he said. "Worse," Lila replied. "He might remember things that were never his to begin with." Caleb looked at Echo again. Really looked. Not just a dog abandoned, but a doorway into something that should have never existed. By late afternoon, the wind began to howl. A blanket of black cloud rolled over the western ridge, muffling the sun early. The birds went quiet, a primal warning Caleb had learned long ago. When nature holds its breath, the storm is near. The cabin groaned with every gust. He tarped the outer hives, left Echo's kennel door wide open, in case confinement brought panic. Then lightning cracked the sky. Thunder roared, sharp and violent. The whole forest shuddered in a flash of white. Echo howled, not a bark, a scream, agonized, like a soul squeezed by something it couldn't name. He bolted, out of the kennel, across the yard, into the woods, chased by shadows only he could see. Caleb stood instantly. No yelling, no chasing. He grabbed his coat, strapped on a headlamp, and walked into the trees. Steady, focused. The way men search ruined camps for survivors. The forest at night breathed like an ancient beast. Rain lashed down. Branches whipped his face. The headlamp sliced uneven shadows across soaked bark. He didn't call for Echo. That would only heighten the panic. He followed tracks' wet paw prints, the scent of wet fur, until he reached an old pine where he used to read. And there was Echo, shivering, curled beneath a low branch, tail tucked, legs folded, eyes wide, blank. Every rumble of thunder sent spasms through him. His jaws snapped at air, fighting ghosts. Caleb didn't approach. He sat, a few feet away, soaked to the bone. He said nothing, just breathed. The rain came down like grief. Thunder cracked again, but Echo didn't flee. "I was like that too," Caleb began, his voice merging with the storm. "First night at Delta Base, lightning hit the antenna. Everyone thought we were under attack." He unstrapped his headlamp, set it on the ground so the beam angled sideways. Not at Echo. I hid under a bench, gun in hand, couldn't stop shaking. My CO said, "Fear won't kill you, pretending you're not afraid that will." I never forgot that. Echo looked, didn't growl, didn't blink, but his eyes began to focus. Caleb removed his coat, draped it over his shoulders, not for warmth, to hide the weapon on his belt. He remembered how war dogs sometimes reacted to the shape of a gun. "You don't have to fight anymore. No more orders. No more sirens. No more enemies here." He bent slowly, hands in the wet soil, face level with Echo's. "Just me. And you." Another flash. This time Echo didn't jerk. He closed his eyes, opened them, and saw Caleb, not as a handler, but as a fellow soldier. Caleb smiled, soft, real. Comrades don't leave each other in the storm. You know that. So do I. The rain didn't stop, but in the ancient forest, one man and one dog sat side by side, like they had always belonged to the same forgotten front line. And in the thunder's wake, Caleb spoke again, not as a memory, but as a vow. Nobody gets left behind. I won't leave you, and you don't have to run anymore. Echo lowered his head, touched his nose to the wet earth, a small gesture. But to Caleb, it was the first nod after a war far too long. Nights in red pines were unnervingly quiet. Not a peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that feels like a frozen lake, where even the softest sound might shatter the surface and reveal the things buried beneath. Caleb had grown used to it. He lived with that silence every night, not just since coming here, but since the years before, in the red sand west of Ramadi. It was the 7th night at the apiary. Echo had started adapting to the rhythm of this place, eating a little, resting at the kennel doorway, or trailing silently behind Caleb as he checked on the hives. But nighttime, that was when neither of them could hide from the dark. The small wooden cabin was lit by oil lamps. Caleb rarely used electric light. A habit from the war, maybe, or simply because he didn't want bright light burning open the memories. That night, the wind picked up. The trees whispered like the voices of those who never made it back. Caleb lay on the old daybed by the window, a half-filled notebook by his side, the pen still resting in the middle of a sentence. He didn't know when he drifted off. And then the rain started, drop by drop, just enough to take him back to a place thousands of miles and lifetimes away. A flash, an explosion, dust, blood. Caleb jolted upright, drenched in sweat. His heart pounded like it might tear through his chest. He clutched his head, doubled over on the couch, eyes wide, but unseeing. He was still there, still in the bombed-out base, still hearing the screams, still catching the garbled radio, still seeing the body of his teammate, unbagged, uncovered. His hands trembled. His breath came short and ragged. He muttered something unintelligible. A code. A call for medevac. An echo of a time too real to be gone. Then something touched his knee. Not hard, just a gentle nudge. Caleb looked up, still not fully escaped from the storm inside his mind. Echo stood there, silent, not barking, not growling, just watching, with eyes no longer filled with fear, but with recognition. The look of someone who knew exactly what that kind of nightmare felt like. Caleb exhaled, a shaky breath. He slid to the floor, his back against the couch, eyes still blurred with sweat and memory. "Sorry," he murmured, unsure if to Echo or himself. "I thought I was done with this." Echo didn't retreat. He sat beside Caleb, didn't touch, didn't lean in, just stayed, like his body had once been trained to guard the wounded. But this time, no orders, no mission, just instinct. And somehow, Caleb wasn't afraid. For the first time in a long while, the nightmare hadn't ended with him running into the forest, or reaching for sedatives, or gripping a gun. Just silence, and a living being sharing that silence. The next morning, when Lila arrived to inspect a hive suffering from mold, she paused on the front porch. "You okay?" Caleb nodded. His face was pale with exhaustion. "Yeah, rough night, but not as bad as usual." Lila glanced down, where Echo lay curled beside the chair, his head resting lightly against its leg. "He stayed with you?" Caleb nodded again. "Didn't leave. Even when I woke up like I was losing it, he just Stayed. Lila smiled. Not the polite kind, the kind that comes with quiet relief. Some scars only a dog can smell. You know that. Caleb didn't reply, but for the first time in years, he didn't shy away from the morning light. He looked at Echo, still sleeping, ears twitching to the fall of a single leaf, and whispered, "I'm starting to understand you too." That afternoon, the sky didn't rain, but thick clouds hung low, like a tarp stretched across the ridge, as if hiding something beneath. Caleb sat alone in the small back room. His makeshift office, an old laptop, a satellite router, and a few notebooks aged by memory. Echo lay outside on the porch, half asleep, but his ears still pivoted toward every faint sound from inside. Caleb hadn't touched the laptop in months, not because he didn't need it, but because reconnecting to the world outside meant risking all the memories tied to it, the names, the news, the wars he had tried to leave unread. But this time was different. Ever since Lila mentioned invasive neural training, one phrase had lodged in his brain like a splinter: Titan Protocol. He had heard it once, back at the 3rd training facility. During a briefing, a commander had slipped, "We're not repeating the Titan Protocol disaster." Everyone laughed, like it was an inside joke. But Caleb had gone silent. His instincts told him the jokes were often where the secrets hid. He opened the laptop, typed slowly, "Titan Protocol plus K9 unit." Nothing concrete. The first dozen results were noise. Old forums, broken blogs, rumors from forgotten veterans. But the 13th result made him freeze. The Ghost Unit. What happened to Titan Protocol's dogs? Byline, J.R. Vance, a former war correspondent for AP, gone from all platforms since 2019. Caleb clicked the link. 404, page not found. He checked the URL. Correct. Tried mirrors, same. Finally, he tried something he hadn't used in years. Google Cached. There was one version, bare bones, no images, no formatting. Just plain black text on white, stripped, as if someone had intended it to disappear, but the content made his blood run cold. Titan Protocol, a high-intensity neural stimulation canine program designed to enhance independent threat assessment and tactical reflex, launched in 2013. Shut down in 2017 after a series of unreleased incidents. One insider noted, "They stopped being dogs. They became something between machine and instinct." At the bottom cutoff midline, one subject code RAE3 was reported to have escaped the Western facility, whereabouts unknown. Caleb looked up. Out the wooden window frame, Echo's shadow still stretched across the dirt, still laying like he didn't know. But when Caleb's gaze landed, Echo lifted his head. No call, no word spoken, just a silent synchrony. Caleb turned back. His hands moved automatically, saved the page, created a PDF, copied it to a backup USB, then searched for J.R. Vance. Nothing. No activity post-2019. Article erased. Accounts deleted. Portraits scrubbed from journalism databases. Someone wanted this man erased. Caleb leaned back, breath thick, stomach cold. Echo was RAE3, not just a military dog, but part of that? A secret program where training wasn't done with treats or commands, but electrodes and neurological reprogramming? If true. Echo wasn't just a survivor. He was the last living proof of something that should have never existed. Caleb closed the laptop, stood, walked to the porch. Echo had already risen, didn't move toward him, just waited. Caleb crouched, eyes level, no longer just a handler. Now, face to face with a being once forged for war. "They want you gone," Caleb whispered. "Maybe they'll want me gone too." Echo tilted his head, not in confusion, but in understanding. Caleb exhaled. "We're not going to let that happen." That night, the small kitchen glowed with a single oil lamp. Caleb preferred that light, not too bright, not too dim, enough to see someone across the table, but soft enough to keep the memories from rising. Lila Chen sat across, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of herbal tea. Her eyes followed the flicker of the flame, as if searching for a sentence in the quiet. Echo lay beneath the table, not sleeping, not tense, just present. Caleb broke the silence. "You mentioned a group of dogs transferred out. Was it connected to Titan?" Lila didn't answer immediately. She twisted the silver ring on her finger, a habit Caleb recognized. It only surfaced before heavy truths. "In 2016, I worked as a veterinary consultant at a military canine center in Utah, just for a few months, but long enough to see something wrong." She paused. Caleb didn't interrupt, just nodded. Lila inhaled. "There was a batch of dogs, recruited from elite units. Their cognitive scores were almost tactical, but they were the hardest to control, not because they were aggressive, but because they knew when to disobey." The lamp cast shadows across her face, lines deepened by memory, not age. One refused to attack a civilian. Another ran toward a trapped squad mate instead of following orders. They called it neural signal interference. But I knew they were choosing. Caleb clenched his fingers. "What happened?" "Command ordered them transferred. I wasn't told where. Just one day, kennels empty. They claimed retraining, but I saw the missing vaccination logs, new injections, not vaccines, and the microchip names were gone." She looked down at Echo, whose breathing was calm but whose ears twitched at the breeze scraping the doorframe. "I asked the supervisor." He smiled and said, "Those dogs don't need orders. They need reprogramming." Neither of them smiled. Echo didn't stir. The silence stretched, like a lake after a stone falls, rippling but never splashing. "I filed an internal report," Lila continued, voice fading. "No one responded. A week later I was let go. No reason, no record, like I'd never been there." Caleb nodded, unsurprised. These things happened in war, in government, nothing new. "And you think Echo was one of them?" Lila nodded slowly. "I don't think. I know." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a crescent scar near her wrist. One of the dogs RAE-3 licked this after a checkup, not instinct. It knew that helped with pain. And the way it looked at me, the same way Echo looked at you last night when you woke up from that dream. Caleb turned to Echo, still there, but now watching, not like an animal hearing its name, but like a survivor, listening to stories from others who had walked the same hell. "RAE, it's a code?" Caleb asked. "Rapid Adaptive Entity," Lila answered, a term they used for dogs that couldn't be fully controlled, but were too intelligent to discard. The silence returned. Rain began tapping the roof. Caleb stood, refilled the lamp. The light grew just a bit. "If that's true, then we're not just sheltering a runaway dog." He paused. "We're guarding the last living proof of a program that was never supposed to exist." Echo stirred. Not startled, not afraid. Just a soft sound, almost human, like someone finally hearing their name spoken aloud. The morning at the apiary began with fog and silence. Dew gathered on the wire fence, refracting early sunlight into fragile streaks of light. Caleb prepared a bucket of warm water, gentle soap, and a large towel. Today was bath day for Echo. He didn't force anything, just sat in the yard, cupping water in his palm, letting Echo approach him step by step, as if reading each movement etched into his face. After over a week, Echo had grown used to being touched, not by a commanding hand, but by one that knew when to stop at the first flinch. Caleb knelt, hands gliding over the fur at Echo's neck, gently scrubbing with the damp towel. Echo stood still, shivering only slightly when the water reached his spine. But when Caleb's fingers passed the base of his skull, Echo jolted, no growl, just a sudden turn of the head, eyes darkening instantly, as if something buried deep had just been awakened. Caleb froze. He didn't press harder, just slid his fingers back to the spot and felt it, a small, hard lump beneath the skin, no bigger than a bean. "Easy," he whispered. "It's okay." Echo didn't move, but his ears dipped, shoulders tensed, like he knew exactly what Caleb had touched. Caleb exhaled. He dried the area carefully, then pressed his hand gently against it, feeling the pulse, the texture beneath the skin, and confirmed it wasn't natural. He didn't hesitate long, went inside, opened the old drawer where he kept a field medical kit from his time in service. Gloves, alcohol, tweezers, a rounded scalpel, and a light dose of animal anesthetic left behind by Lila during her first visit. Caleb wasn't a vet, but he had stitched wounds on the battlefield, in darkness, without morphine. He once saved a friend's hand by dislocating it under flashlight. This wasn't reckless. This was necessary. He returned. Echo hadn't moved. No retreat. No hiding. Just watching. Those unblinking brown eyes locked on him. Caleb sat beside him, pulled out the syringe. "This'll keep it from hurting. I'll be as gentle as I can." The needle went in without protest. Echo simply closed his eyes and waited. Caleb made the incision. Blood welled only slightly, and beneath the thin tissue, a shimmer of metal. Carefully, he reached in with tweezers and pulled it free, a small device no bigger than a fingertip, wrapped in rubber insulation with a contact face that gleamed like circuitry. He set it into a metal tray. It landed with a chilling ting, then cleaned the wound. 2 tight stitches, a soft bandage. Echo didn't flinch. Caleb stared at the device, his chest heavy. This wasn't a pet microchip. No serial. No RFID tag. This was a frequency receiver. Military grade. Something from the world of black projects. He wiped it clean, shone a flashlight over it. On the edge, etched, so fine he had to squint, was a tiny string of characters. Ray 3 Ketrel 0046. There was no doubt anymore. This didn't just track, it controlled. When he looked back, Echo's eyes were open, watching him, not like a patient watches a doctor, but like a soldier waiting for a truth to be spoken. Caleb sat beside him, held up the metal sliver between them, as if presenting the evidence of a crime they had both survived. "They put this in you to control you. But now, you're free." Echo lowered his head, nudged his nose gently against the gauze, a small gesture, but enough to tell Caleb that in this moment, in pain and silence, they were no longer just man and dog. They were survivors of something designed to turn them both into tools. That night, Red Pines fell into an unnatural silence. No insects, no owls, only stillness, as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to arrive. Caleb sat in his workroom, the tray still holding the chip on the table. The yellow glow from the desk lamp cast his shadow against the wall, long and jagged, like a man who'd walked too far through too many wars. Then the landline rang. Caleb flinched. Not his cell, the satellite-linked landline, the one meant for secure, off-grid internal calls. It was dusty from disuse. He looked at the screen. No ID. Just 2 words. Unknown caller. His finger hovered. Then he picked up. Hello? A long silence. Then a man's voice, rough, stripped of all pretense. Is the asset still alive? No breath, no greeting, just one question, cold as steel on a throat. Caleb stiffened. Who is this? He asked, voice low. No answer. Then the voice returned, slower now, each word squeezed like it hurt to speak. If it is, perhaps you should ask yourself why it ended up with you. Click. The call cut. Caleb remained still, receiver still pressed to his ear, as if the echo was still winding through the old wiring. He didn't need more explanation. That question, is the asset still alive, wasn't concern. It was a threat. He turned. Echo stood in the doorway, eyes locked on his, as if he too had felt the tremor ripple through the air. Caleb set the phone down, stepped to the old cabinet, pulled open the bottom drawer, where he kept a metal box with a satellite router and admin login credentials. He plugged in, switched on the access monitor. Lines of code flickered across the screen, IP logs, pings, surveillance flags. In the top right corner, a blinking red line. Passive trace detected, level 2 surveillance active. He understood instantly. Someone didn't just know he had Echo. They'd been tracking him for days. Maybe since he searched for Titan Protocol. Maybe since he downloaded the cached article. Or maybe the chip itself, even removed, had sent out one last signal. Caleb shut everything down, unplugged, pulled the SIM, killed the power. He turned to Echo. They know. Echo didn't react, just stepped closer, sat beside him, calm, grounded. But his eyes were not those of a dog swept into a world he didn't understand. They were the eyes of a soldier, ready to stay on the line. Caleb exhaled, switched to a backup SIM, routed through an old military VPN. One message to a trusted contact. Need trace block. Passive level 2 confirmed. Subject RAE-3. He didn't expect a fast reply, but someone at the Pentagon would now know. The ghost they thought had been buried was still breathing. Caleb looked again at the chip. The lamplight reflected off its metal face like a mechanical eye. There was no doubt. The war he thought he left behind 5 years ago had just begun again. The cabin was still. Caleb sat at the wooden table across from Lila. The overhead light spilled soft yellow across their faces. On the table, the chip, and a printed page from the cached article RAE 3 CTRL 0046, still clearly legible. Could this be an identifier? Caleb asked, tapping the corner of the document. RAE plus a serial? If that's true, Lila nodded slowly, eyes drifting to Echo asleep beneath the table. Or so it seemed. His ears still perked slightly. "Ranger Alpha Echo," she whispered. "Ray." Caleb frowned. "What?" "It's a coded name. Ranger Ground Combat Unit. Alpha Lead Group. Echo 5th Team in the sequence. RAE. It could be a mission designation." She paused, then turned to him. "Try calling him properly, like in command protocol." Caleb hesitated. He'd spent years trying to erase the habits of command, the bark of radios, the burden of orders, but something in his gut told him this was necessary. He straightened, shoulders back, stance firm, like a commander again, and spoke, not loud, but clear and exact. "Ranger Alpha Echo 3, Stand 2. Echo sprang up, not startled, triggered. He moved into the center of the room, positioned in front of Caleb, tail stiff, ears up, eyes wide, not with fear, but focus. The stare of a war dog, activated. Caleb froze, heart pounding, not from fear, but from the chilling realization. He had just called forth something no longer fully dog. Echo made no sound, just waited. Lila swallowed. Hands trembling, she pulled a small flashlight from her coat. Its red LED pulsed in a pattern. 3 short, 1 long, perimeter defense, Tier 1. Echo took 2 steps back, turned, lowered his stance, muscles tense, blocking the door. Caleb gasped. "Dear God." Lila crouched, voice low. "Echo," she said, using his name for the first time. "Echo, stand down." A pause. Echo turned. Eyes met hers, then Caleb's. And in that silence, something behind those eyes fell away, like a mask slipping. His posture eased. Ears dropped. Tail lowered. He stepped forward and sat at Caleb's feet. Gaze soft, no longer sharp. Caleb knelt. "So that's your name. Ranger Alpha Echo 3, RAE. His hand reached out, stroked between the ears. "Echo," he whispered. "But from now on..." "Just that." Echo made a quiet sound, almost human, a sound of acceptance, maybe even forgiveness. Lila smiled, barely audible. No longer a tool, no longer a command line. He's chosen. Caleb nodded, his hand still resting on Echo's head. In that moment, inside the quiet wooden cabin, 3 souls, 2 human, 1 not, reached into a memory only they could understand. The name had been spoken, the past removed from flesh. And for the first time, Caleb realized he hadn't saved a dog. He had called back an old comrade from the dark. The late-night moon was thin, like a silver blade slashing across the sky. Red Pines was usually quiet at night, just the rustle of wind in the treetops, the murmur of distant insects, and the golden flicker of lantern light spilling from the wooden cabin's windows. But tonight, for some reason, Caleb felt something was off. Echo had already made a full patrol around the camp, a new habit it had developed. It never slept deeply, just lay curled near the door, head resting on its front paws, ears tilted back like radar antennae scanning for danger. Around 2 a.m., Caleb was at his writing desk, reviewing files related to the Titan protocol, when Echo suddenly sprang up. No barking, just a shiver. A subtle movement, but Caleb noticed it instantly. He stood up on instinct and switched off the desk lamp. Darkness swallowed the room. All he could hear was the beat of his own heart, steady but quicker than normal. Echo crept to the door, nose pressed against the wooden crack. Then a low growl, not loud, but the tone in that growl only those who'd heard death hiss on the battlefield would understand. Something was closing in, and it wasn't a wild animal. Caleb rushed to the compartment beneath the stairs, unlocked it, and pulled out a sawed-off shotgun. He checked the chamber and loaded 2 12-gauge shells lethal at close range. He didn't say a word to Echo. He didn't need to. Echo was already waiting by the door. Tail rigid, center of gravity lowered, body poised forward like a compressed spring. Crack, a faint sound, like a boot snapping a dry twig, echoed from the rear door. Caleb turned and lightly tapped Echo's shoulder, an unspoken signal they'd rehearsed on previous nights. Echo followed, silent as a shadow. They slipped around the side of the house. Through a small kitchen window, moonlight reflected off a silver surface the barrel of a gun. No more doubt. There were at least 3 men, dressed in black, wearing half-face masks, moving in a V formation, 2 flanking, 1 at the center. Caleb knew immediately. These weren't ordinary thieves. They were trained. He gave the signal. Echo vanished into the darkness like a whisper. 3 seconds later, an agonized scream ripped through the forest. 1 man flew out from the tree line, rolled thrice on the ground, legs thrashing wildly as Echo locked onto his right shoulder. Caleb charged in, firing a warning shot skyward. The blast tore through the quiet woods. The other 2 responded instantly, but it was too late. Echo hurled the first man to the ground, then spun around like a blade, launching itself at the second, just as he drew his gun. He didn't even get a shot off. Echo slammed into his midsection with surgical precision. The last one tried to flee. Caleb raised his gun, but Echo let out a short, sharp bark, not a warning but a command. "Don't!" Caleb lowered his weapon. Echo sprinted after the last man, not to kill, just to pressure him until he tumbled into the ravine, then returned, calm as if nothing had happened. Caleb bound the 2 surviving intruders with military-grade cord he still kept from his service days. Their uniforms were torn, but they weren't bleeding badly. Echo had neutralized, not executed. Lila burst from the back of the house, breathless. "What happened?" Caleb replied tersely. "Titan's men. I'd bet they came to wipe the trail." Lila looked around. 2 men clad in solid black, no insignia, no rank, no ID, but their eyes, unmistakable, cold, empty, programmed. Echo returned and sat beside Caleb, panting heavily, eyes wide, eerily alert. "He knows exactly what he's doing," Lila whispered. Caleb nodded. "That's not a dog. That's a soldier." Echo turned, his eyes still and stone-like. But in that split second, Caleb saw something almost human, not instinct, but choice. And that choice saved the entire apiary. Dawn hadn't fully broken. Early mist still clung to the pine branches around the bee farm. But Caleb didn't feel the cold. Something inside him had changed, as if the chaos of that night had blown the dust off a part of his memory, revealing a truth he'd long refused to face. Echo wasn't just a trained dog. He was a warrior. Caleb stood in the backyard, arms folded, watching Echo scan every hidden corner around the property. No command, no whistle, no hand signal. Just instinct terrifyingly precise. Echo didn't follow the trail. He slipped through the west fence and vaulted onto a wooden platform by the wall, a high, hard-to-reach perch. There, he paused, scanning the blind spots where the intruders had hidden the night before. Caleb watched as Echo shifted positions constantly, always keeping his back to cover, rotating his head in an arc, never exposing his full body. Exactly like SEAL operatives in urban terrain training. And he wasn't acting on programming, he was thinking. When Caleb set up 3 sticks to simulate moving targets, Echo didn't lunge like a standard canine. Instead, he trailed behind in a zigzag pattern to hide his tracks, then struck from a blind spot, with such precision it made no sound. Caleb crouched low, waiting for Echo to return. When he did, Caleb knelt and stared into his eyes. "You didn't learn this from basic training, did you?" Echo exhaled, tongue out, but his eyes never left Caleb's. There was nothing innocent, nothing accidental, only a cold awareness, something Caleb had only seen in comrades returning from secret ops in Mogadishu, where day and night, right and wrong, blurred into nothing. Caleb pulled a satellite map from his jacket and marked the 3 breach points from the night before. Then he asked, "If you were leading the assault, where would you station your team?" He laid the map on the ground, turned away, gave no hints. 1 minute later, when he looked back, Echo had pawed the northeastern edge near the creek, a spot Caleb had assumed was safe due to its rough terrain. Caleb froze. That spot would have been perfect for a sniper nest or signal jammer had Echo not intercepted the breach early. He looked at Echo as if meeting him for the first time. "God, you weren't just trained. You commanded." The chime of a wind bell whispered from the porch. Echo looked up instinctively, then turned back to Caleb and sat, waiting. No command, no treat, just connection. Caleb patted his shoulder. "From now on, you're not just you." He leaned in, pressing his forehead to Echo's a silent ritual. In the military, it was how one acknowledged a fellow warrior. "You're my teammate, my brother in arms, and if they come back, you won't fight alone." Echo licked his cheek slowly, not excited, but a sign of acceptance. They sat together in the early light, under silent pines. No words, but clearly something had awakened, not just in Echo, but in Caleb too, something buried under the labels of retired and war's over, something ready to rise again, not for orders, but for what was right. Meanwhile, Lila combed through the dusty storage room of her late father, a former military veterinarian stationed at a support base in Utah. After his passing, the house had sat untouched for 3 years, preserved in reverence for a man who had quietly saved countless war dogs behind the scenes. She never thought she'd return so soon. But after the attack, after seeing Echo fight like a Spec Ops veteran, and after witnessing his tactics with spine-chilling precision, she knew a piece of the past needed uncovering. She opened box after box, faded X-rays labeled in stiff handwriting. Fracture, left patella. Mild sympathetic nerve dysfunction due to cortical trauma. Even old cassette tapes, one marked with the eerie howl of a dog named Ringo post-hormone trial. Then she froze. A battered green military file, edges frayed, stamped on the cover, Project Titan, classified, Level 3. Inside, most documents were stripped, but one photograph remained, tucked in a cloudy plastic sleeve. She pulled it out. The image was old, faded, yellowed. It showed 7 German shepherds standing in formation, each fitted with locator bands and training vests marked RAE. At the center stood a man in camo, arms folded, eyes staring straight at the lens. The photo's top left corner was torn right, where the unit name had been, but his eyes, unmistakable, hard as stone, cold as steel. The gaze of a man who gave orders without ever asking why. Lila flipped the photo. Scrawled on the back was a line in tiny handwriting. Ray 3, uncontrollable. Recommend return to center. VH. Lila clenched her fist. She'd heard that name before. Vernon Hale, a colonel, reportedly the technical director of the Titan Protocol Phase 2, investigated for allegedly testing forced neural impulse waves on animals. The file vanished later. No charges, no press. And now he appeared in a photo with Echo. Lila snapped a picture with her phone, then brought the original back to Red Pines. By the time she returned, the sky had shifted to dusk. Caleb was repairing the wooden fence after the infiltration. Echo lay under a tree, gazing at the sky, eerily peaceful. Lila said nothing. She simply handed over the photo. Caleb took it. His eyes lingered on the third dog in the row-thick black coat, deep-set eyes, left ear slightly folded, identical to Echo. He looked up. Echo didn't look at the photo, but his tail twitched. Ears flattened. "It's you, isn't it?" Caleb whispered. Lila nodded. Ray 3, Ranger, Alpha, Echo 3, codename, and the handler, Hale. Caleb clenched the photo. Vernon Hale, a shadow in the war machine. Never praised, never prosecuted. A ghost who lived between science and warfare. And now, he was hunting what he once created. Caleb sat on the steps, photo still in hand. Echo rested his head on Caleb's knee, a silent confirmation. The past had caught up. But this time, they weren't running. Early mornings in Washington, D.C. always carried a peculiar kind of sterile cleanliness, mist-veiled streets, cars gliding silently over fresh concrete, and buildings wrapped in glass like mute, emotionless monoliths. Caleb never thought he'd return here. But the torn photograph bearing Vernon Hale, the code Ray 3, and the gunfire echoing through the Red Pines night had pulled him out of the forest, out of the illusion of peace. He moved swiftly through the rear entrance of a small office near Langley. No signage, no address, just a retinal scanner and a security system that would make even frontline military bases jealous. The door opened into a short hallway, the scent of steel and antiseptic chemicals hitting him like a slap. Waiting inside was a man more silver in his hair than the last time they met, but his eyes were unchanged, dull gray, deep and cold as a desert operation. "Merrick," the man said, not rising. "I thought you died in the Mosul op." Caleb sat without smiling. Almost did. The man's name was Silas Ward, former liaison officer of SEAL Team 5's Intelligence Division. Now a senior intelligence analyst at the Pentagon, with clearance to the deepest layers of black ops. More importantly, the only person Caleb ever trusted when everything collapsed. Caleb opened a small fabric pouch and placed it on the table. A tracking chip he had removed from Echo's neck. Silas pulled on gloves, lifted the chip with tweezers, and held it up to the light. Clever camouflage. Ultra-thin circuitry. Not commercial tech. "I know," Caleb said. "I need you to trace its origin." Silas inserted the chip into an analyzer and waited a few minutes. The screen lit up with rows of code most encrypted at military-grade levels, but a few segments remained legible. Titan Protocol. Ray 3 blinked in the lower left corner. Silas looked up. "Damn it! You just pulled me into a kill zone." "I don't need you in it," Caleb replied, eyes steady. "I just need the truth." Silas was silent for a few seconds. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a portable hard drive, the kind used for offline transfers only. He copied the raw data from the analyzer and added another file marked Classified TP Zeta B3. This contains what's left of the Titan protocol, Zeta-level clearance, which means not even Congress has the full picture. Most was deleted, but some fragments remain. Structural outlines, dog code names, coordination units. It's real. Does it mention Vernon Hale? Silas's eyes chilled further. He's not a person. He's a shadow. All records of Hale are triple encrypted, stored in analog format, no online access. Even his name never appears in official documents. But he opened an image file, faded, black and white, clearly a scanned print. A group of people in uniform with no insignia. At the center stood a tall, gray-haired man, arms folded, an exact match for the figure in Lila's photo. Silas zoomed in beneath the photo. Handwritten notes read, "Experimental Unit, Ray Series, Training Camp, High Point, Nevada. Command, VH." Caleb clenched his fists. "He's trying to reclaim what he created," Caleb murmured. Echo was one of them. Silas paused, then scribbled down a string of numbers and coordinates. "This is High Point Camp. It's been shut down. But I heard that after Titan Protocol was dissolved, a group left the Pentagon to restructure assets off-grid. If true, Hale isn't done." Caleb stood, grabbing the hard drive. "Thank you. I owe you again." Silas looked at him and lowered his voice. "Be careful, Merrick. If Titan resurfaces, it won't just be a program. It'll be an ideology with teeth." Caleb walked down the hall without looking back. Echo waited in the car. Its eyes reflected the streetlight, deep, silent, as if it already understood whatever Caleb brought back would change everything. Night fell quietly over red pines, so still. Even the wind slipping through the wooden walls sounded like breathing. In the small cabin, Caleb sat before the screen, the hard drive from Silas still warm from decryption. The data was sparse, but enough to unlock a door he never expected. A hidden video untitled, labeled only Ray 3, Incident 7, SR DC 19. Caleb clicked. The footage jittered, low resolution like something secretly recorded from a body cam. The screen opened on an American forward base in Syria. Scattered white containers, sandbags, rifles on wall mounts, dust-red sky. In frame, a squad of U.S. soldiers on lunch break. One man in uniform, his face blurred, voice clear spoke. "Ray 3, hold position." The bottom of the screen lit up. Command mode, active. Echo, or rather Ray 3, sat still beside the guard post. Dust clung to his fur, ears erect, eyes unblinking. An officer pulled out a phone, seemingly checking something. Suddenly, Ray 3 turned east. No one noticed. It shivered, didn't bark, just emitted a barely audible growl. One soldier laughed. "Dreaming of cats again, Ray?" But in the dog's eyes, something had shifted. Tension, focus, every muscle coiled for action. Then it ran. Not on command, not waiting for orders. It broke free, bolting through the electric fence and out of the base perimeter. Someone shouted, "Ray 3, stop! That's a level 2 breach!" Seconds later, a thunderous explosion. A shell had landed on the fuel depot 100 meters from the post right where Echo had dashed. Smoke clouded the frame. The camera shook violently, followed by screaming. One soldier yelled, "God! Echo dragged Parker out! I saw him pull him clear before the blast!" The shot cut to Echo shielding an injured soldier with his entire body, both lying still in a shallow crater. By the time medics arrived, RAE-3 had shrapnel in his left shoulder, blood soaking half his torso. He didn't whimper, didn't growl, just stared wide-eyed toward the command post. The screen froze on an image of Echo being stretchered to the rear base. A caption appeared, like an internal memo. Ray 3, breached command protocol, abandoned post. Assessment, no longer controllable. Recommendation, remove from combat unit. Caleb closed the video. His hands shook. Not from fear, but fury. A dog had sensed the threat, disobeyed orders, saved a life. And what he got was a sentence to oblivion. He looked down at Echo lying under the desk, head on paws, eyes closed, ears still alert. Caleb whispered, "They said you disobeyed. But if obeying means watching your teammate die, I'd break ranks too." Echo didn't open his eyes, but his tail gave a soft twitch. Lila stepped in behind him, placing a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "It's not that he didn't follow orders," she said softly. "His heart just couldn't stay silent in the face of wrong." Caleb squeezed her hand gently. "Now I see why they want him back. Because in what they call defiance, Echo is the one thing they can't reprogram." Outside, the wind howled. Winter was closing in, and one truth had never been clearer. Echo wasn't broken. He just didn't belong to those who refused to listen. In the pale afternoon light, Caleb and Lila sat side by side on the old wooden bench outside the cabin. Echo lay at their feet, eyes half closed, but ears pricked, as if listening to all the lies the world whispered around them. The hard drive from Silas had decrypted another layer. This time, no video, just a string of internal reports, loosely encrypted, labeled Titan PRTCL, subnode, CANIDRAE. Lila opened them slowly as if afraid to hurt the names that had already been forgotten. Report 11, Units Ray 1 to Ray 7 exhibit high independent response levels. Neurological signals exceeding predicted thresholds. RA4 and Ray 6 terminated due to behavioral instability. Ray 2 missing during transport. RA5 unresponsive after gamma wave neural injection trial. Only Ray 3 remains stable but resisting signal compliance. Recommendation, monitor, retrain, or decommission. Caleb clenched his fists. No explanation needed. One by one, they were eliminated. Not because they weren't smart, but because they were too smart. Not because they failed to respond, but because their moral instinct contradicted programmed obedience. Lila pointed to another line. High Point facility suspended following RA protocol collapse. Remaining units marked as retired. No burial records. "Retired?" she echoed, voice cracking. "Pretty way of saying slaughterhouse." Caleb said nothing. In his mind, images began to form, ones no one had ever seen. Cold metal kennels, dogs injected with something that made their eyes go blank, bones tossed behind fences, howls at night met with silence. Echo Ray 3 was the only one who walked out of that place, not whole, not innocent, but alive, and he remembered. "There's no one else," Caleb said, eyes fixed on Echo. "Only he carries the story." Lila nodded gently. But now he doesn't carry it alone. She stroked Echo's head. For the first time, he didn't flinch. He tilted into her palm as if he finally knew who was truly on his side. Caleb stood and went inside. Minutes later, he returned holding a piece of old wood carved with a dagger into rough letters. Those who were silenced. Below the words he etched 7 tally marks, no names, 7 beings, 7 war dogs, a unit of warriors never honored. Caleb nailed the sign to the great tree by the apiary, where Echo walked every morning. Not to mourn with tears, but to affirm through presence. Lila stood beside him. "I used to think science was about discovery," she said slowly. "But without ethics, it becomes an excuse to strip away humanity, whether from a person or a loyal creature." Caleb looked toward the horizon, the sunset bleeding red over the pine ridge. "We can't bring them back, but we can make the world know that they lived, they fought, and they chose what was right, even if it cost them their lives." Echo didn't look at the wooden sign. He simply raised his head and exhaled softly, as if in farewell. But this time there was no loneliness in his eyes. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. That morning, red pines bathed in gentle golden light, the rare brilliance of late autumn, as pine needles whispered overhead, and the ground was veiled in a thin mist like a bridal veil. Caleb was mending the northern fence of the kennel when he heard the sound of a car pulling up outside the gate. The sound didn't match any of the locals, nor was it the vet's vehicle. An old olive-green Ford from the 90s rolled to a dusty stop. The door opened slowly, and out stepped an elderly woman with white hair, wrapped in a brown wool cloak, holding a faded canvas bag. Caleb frowned slightly. She didn't look lost or confused like most accidental visitors. Her face was lined with time, but her eyes were steady, certain, as if she'd spent a lifetime walking here to exactly this place. "Excuse me," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "Is this the place? Keeping a dog named Echo?" Caleb stepped forward. "And you are—" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a worn, black-and-white photo creased and fading. In it, a young soldier beamed with joy, holding a German shepherd that looked exactly like Echo. "His name was Ranger," she said softly. "My son's war dog. He served in Syria, under the RAE unit." Caleb took the photo, eyes scanning it. It was one of those rare snapshots taken before deployment. The soldier wore uniform, sunlight behind him, and Echo or Ranger still had that bright, youthful gleam in his eyes. No scars, no darkness. "Your son was David Harlan." "Sergeant," she said, looking directly into Caleb's eyes. "He died 3 years ago in a frontline attack. I received everything, the medals, the letter, his belongings, except one thing, his dog." Caleb's heart skipped. That name. It matched the files he'd seen on the hard drive, David Harlan, RA3's original handler. Echo emerged from the kennel. No one called him. He simply sensed something. His steps were light but measured, ears slightly lowered, eyes fixed on the old woman, not guarded, not aggressive, but not rushed either. The entire camp fell silent. Caleb stood still, watching every movement. Echo stopped about 6 feet away. They looked at each other. A long pause, as if time had slowed to allow memory to surface. With trembling hands, the old woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of fabric, old and frayed, embroidered with 2 interlocked letters. N.D., Ranger and David. I made this as a mat for his kennel. David sent me a picture of it. He said Ranger liked lying on this more than anywhere else. Echo didn't move. Then, in a slow, almost imperceptible shift, he stepped forward 2 steps, lowered his head. His nose touched the cloth. And then, in a moment that made Caleb forget to breathe, Echo tilted his head and gently leaned into the old woman's chest. No barking, no growling, no trembling, just peace. As if after all the years of wild survival, he had finally touched a piece of safety. The woman broke into tears, not loud, but steady. The wrinkles on her cheeks caught the drops as they fell onto Echo's head, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he closed his eyes and let out a slow sigh, like a soldier finally hearing his mother's voice after the war. Caleb's heart sank at the sight. "You're welcome here," he said softly. "This place belongs to those who've lost and are trying to find again." The old woman looked up, wiping her tears. "I didn't come to take him back. I just needed to know if he remembered. And he did." Echo gently licked her hand for the first time, touching a stranger with tenderness. And Caleb understood. In a world where loyalty could be labeled as insubordination, where instincts were mistaken for malfunction, there was one thing no system could erase: memory. It could never be taken. That evening, red pines glowed in an unusual amber light. The sky painted like a child's messy drawing, setting the clouds ablaze and dyeing the forest gold. Caleb stood by the western kennels, inspecting the honey harvest with Lila. Echo, after the emotional morning with Mrs. Harlan, was quieter than usual. He lay with paws crossed, watching the trail where 2 rescued pups were playfully tumbling in the shade. Caleb checked his watch. "Odd. The food delivery guy's usually here by now." Lila nodded, checking her phone. No signal. The network was down. Then, a deafening blast tore through the air. The mountains echoed. Caleb shot up, eyes fixed on the southern gate where the delivery truck was now engulfed in flames. "That's not a tire," he growled. "That's explosives." The fire rapidly spread across the dry grass toward the tree line where the 2 pups played. Echo had already leapt to his feet. Without waiting for a command, he bolted like a missile through the forest. Thick black smoke swirled. Flames licked the pine trunks and dry shrubs. Caleb sprinted behind, shouting, "Echo, get back!" But he didn't stop. Just like Syria, he didn't wait for permission. The 2 pups cowered beneath the tree, barking in panic. Fire surged toward them. Echo barreled through, never dodging, never veering. He blocked the fire with his own body, grabbed one by the scruff and dragged it out, then turned for the other. A wall of smoke collapsed over them. All 3 vanished into the gray suffocation. Caleb arrived with a wet blanket, just in time to see Echo stumbling out of the scorched brush, both pups in tow. His eyes were bloodshot, fur singed. His body trembled violently. "Got 'em!" Caleb roared, scooping up Echo and the pups, dragging them out of harm's way. Lila arrived moments later with villagers carrying extinguishers and more blankets. Echo collapsed as soon as they reached the edge of the woods. His mouth hung open, gasping, eyes glazed, chest heaving with effort. "Smoke inhalation," Lila said, checking his pulse. "Second-degree burns on the chest and hind legs." Caleb dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to Echo's. "You've done enough. You hear me, Echo? No one would have blamed you for running, but you came back." Echo lifted his head slightly as if to say, "I hear you," then closed his eyes. Caleb's heart clenched. Lila snapped into command. Get the oxygen kit. I need an IV bag. Call the vet from the valley. Now!" That night, the bee farm became a field hospital. Villagers, veterans, volunteers, even Mrs. Harlan gathered around Echo. The young girl who owned the 2 pups cried herself hoarse, clutching a blanket in the corner of the kennel. Echo's breathing sounded like wind scraping through mountains. But it was steady. Caleb didn't leave his side. His hand never left Echo's back, tapping a steady rhythm, just like he used to with wounded comrades years ago. "No one asked you to be a hero, Echo, but you walked into the fire anyway, because you're you." Echo didn't respond, just a faint flick of his tail brushing Caleb's wrist. Then stillness. The red pine's night turned frigid. Mist fell thick, casting a pale frost across the rooftops. But in the lit wooden cabin at the valley's edge, no one felt cold because inside, a fragile life clung by threads. Echo lay still on a makeshift bed lined with villagers' coats and old blankets. His body streaked with soot, patches of fur burned away, nose crusted with mud and dried blood. A small oxygen mask puffed warm air into lungs numbed by ash. Caleb sat beside him, sweat and dirt soaked into his shirt, hand resting over Echo's ribs, counting the shallow rises. Slow, weak, but still there. Lila's eyes never left the vitals. The town vet, Mr. Ramirez, had arrived, his hands shaking with age, but eyes sharp. "He's got a chance, but he needs fluids, thermal shock control, and emergency lung support." In an instant, the room became a trauma center. Old Howard, a war medic, managed the IV. 2 young villagers sprinted to the pharmacy for burn supplies. The little girl still sat in the corner, clutching a crumpled drawing. The brave dog. Lila wiped the moisture from the corners of her eyes. "We're not just saving a dog. We're holding on to something greater." Caleb said nothing, lips tight, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. But one thing he knew beyond doubt. Echo had once been cast out from survival's edge, and he came back. No one else, only him carried the memories of those with no names. Only him had walked through fire not for medals, but to protect what was smallest. 2 lives that hadn't even learned to bark. Just before dawn, as light crept over the mountains, Echo's breathing began to stabilize. Not full recovery, not victory, but unmistakably, life was returning. Caleb broke down. No sobbing, just tears falling silently onto Echo's head, and this time the dog didn't flinch or look away. His eyes cracked open. Not much, just enough to see Caleb, to see light, to see faith. Lila smiled gently. "He's not letting go. What's inside him is stronger than pain." Mrs. Harlan, who had stayed the entire night outside, walked in and placed a small cloth around Echo's neck. She had embroidered 2 words, "Survivor." With trembling hands, she stroked his head and said, "My son didn't make it home, but you did. So, you must live, not just for yourself, but for all those who couldn't." Echo blinked once. Caleb gripped his paw eyes, now lit with something he thought war had stolen forever. "I'm here, not leaving. Hold on, Echo." The wall clock ticked slowly. The room was heavy with the scent of medicine, charcoal, and scorched, fur-thick as the question in everyone's mind, will it be enough? And then, as sunrise fully broke, Echo stirred. Slowly, weakly, but it was real. From the corner of the room, the 2 pups let out soft yips as if announcing, "He's still here." A retired soldier stood up straight and gave a crisp salute. No one laughed. No one spoke. Only the steady heartbeat of a war dog once called dead weight, broken gear, now thumping proudly in the arms of those who had long stopped believing in miracles. Until that night. Noon. The small room behind the apiary had been turned into a makeshift command center. On the wooden table sat a stack of printed files from Silas's hard drive, neatly arranged beside a laptop, broadcasting a live stream to social media where thousands of people waited, eyes locked, for the first declaration. Caleb stood before the camera, wearing a white button-down shirt, holding a smudged sheet of handwritten notes, his hand trembling slightly, but his gaze unwavering. Behind him, Echo, still not fully recovered, sat close by, bandages wrapped around his chest, breathing slow and steady. He didn't need to be mentioned. His presence was its own statement. Caleb began. "My name is Caleb Merrick. I served as a U.S. Marine. I once believed that a warrior's honor lay in obedience." He paused. "But today, I am releasing the full records of something called the Titan Protocol, a secret military program that used dogs not as comrades, but as tools. What I'm about to share is not just data. It's the story of souls buried alive in the name of a nation." The sound of a keyboard clicked behind him. Lila was uploading the documents to a public cloud and sending them to over 40 media outlets. Caleb continued, his voice slow, slicing through the silence like a blade. "They called it neural advancement, emotional control, gamma pulse reflex reprogramming. But what I read was horror. Injecting chemicals into puppies before their eyes opened, electroshocking them to mold their reactions, erasing their memories of their handlers using neural waves, issuing deletion orders when a subject became too intelligent to obey unconditionally." He held up a photo, faded but unmistakable. "This is Echo. Codename RA3, labeled unfit after refusing a command that would have cost his unit dearly. But that refusal, that act of disobedience, saved their lives." The room froze. Though live on social media, no one spoke. On screen, new viewers joined: 5.7K, 7.9K, 11.2K. Caleb bowed his head, his voice thickening. "We praise loyalty, then destroy those who are loyal in the right way. We dress them in rank, then discard them like trash when they stop being the perfect weapon." Lila stood, raising a small USB. "This drive contains the encrypted core of the Titan Protocol training videos, fatality reports for the RAE-labeled units. We're not asking for forgiveness. We just want one question asked. Is a living being something we have the right to control completely, simply because it isn't human?" That afternoon, social media exploded. Hashtags like #RA3, #Titan Protocol, and #Echo Still Alive spread across Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit like wildfire. News outlets began special broadcasts. The dog who was discarded for disobedience, now a symbol of moral courage. CNN, NPR, and the New York Times requested interviews with Caleb. An independent channel replayed the live stream and hit 3 million views in under 8 hours. But what moved Caleb wasn't the numbers. It was the inbox flooded with letters from veterans and former K-9 trainers, each recounting stories they'd never dared speak aloud. One line in particular stopped him cold. "I trained RA5. He died trying to bite through the injection needle. I thought I was the only one who remembered him. Now I know I'm not." Caleb printed that message and pinned it to the wall of the cabin. Echo walked over, sniffed the paper, then lay down beneath it as if he understood. Part of the broken dreams had finally found their voice. And that was only the beginning. Vernon Hale, the man behind the Titan Protocol, had yet to appear. But now he could no longer hide behind government walls, because Echo, the dog who was supposed to be erased, was living proof. Federal Military Court, Fort Meade, Maryland. A slab of cold concrete surrounded by manicured lawns, a place that had witnessed trials of treason, ethical violations, and secrets never recorded in official histories. But today, Courtroom 3 wasn't for whistleblowers or missing weapons. Today, it opened for a dog. Caleb's old pickup rolled to a stop at the security gate. Echo sat in the truck bed, scars still fresh on his coat, gauze loose around his chest, silent witness. His eyes scanned the compound, not afraid, not anxious, just calm, as if returning to familiar ground. "We're not bringing him to beg for sympathy," Caleb whispered, tightening the leash. "I know," Lila replied. "He's here to remind them that truth can look you in the eye." Inside the courtroom, hundreds had gathered. Every kind of uniform: journalists, human rights observers, representatives from military veterinary programs. Scattered among the seats were aging veterans from Afghanistan, watchful, unblinking. Presiding was General Raymond Croft, who tapped the mic twice. "This hearing is to verify allegations regarding the Titan Protocol, namely, invasive neural testing on service animals, ethical violations in command, and the treatment of living creatures as disposable assets. Colonel Vernon Hale, are you present?" A man stepped forward. Vernon Hale, flawless gray suit, a face carved from stone. Not a twitch as Echo entered with Caleb. Hale glanced at the dog. No flicker of recognition. "I never authorized mistreatment or termination of any subject without ethical clearance." "And who approved the ethical clearance for implanting neural chips into 3-month-old puppies?" Caleb snapped, standing with a thick stack of documents. "I have the neural analysis of RAE-3 Echo. The device malfunctioned from overload. That means your system pushed him to obey past the threshold of brain death." Murmurs rippled through the room. "That subject broke protocol, didn't it?" Hale growled, trying to flip the narrative. "Broke protocol to save lives," Lila interjected. 7 people were rescued during that ambush in Syria, thanks to one act of free will. Echo stepped toward the stand. The room fell into total silence. Caleb gave no command, no signal, just tapped his chest over an old scar. Echo looked at him. 1 second, 2, then sat, front paws crossed, head bowed. No trainer, no clicker, no treat. Just the reflex of a warrior who knows the battlefield between right and wrong. General Croft frowned. "Then what, Mr. Merrick? Separates a weapon from a comrade?" Caleb stepped forward, never breaking eye contact with Hale. "A weapon can't choose what's right. A comrade can. And sometimes true loyalty is having the courage to say no." Hale said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Lila placed the USB on the evidence table. Inside are files showing the other retired subjects were euthanized by neural shutdown. This wasn't retirement. It was silent execution. A high-ranking Homeland Security officer leaned in and whispered to Croft. He nodded. Croft struck his gavel. "The hearing will proceed with further investigation. Effective immediately, the Titan Protocol is permanently suspended. All relevant files are to be conditionally declassified and submitted to the Defense Ethics Oversight Committee." Applause broke out. Not loud, not orchestrated, but real. Echo stood, turning to face Caleb. And in that moment, no one saw him as just a dog. They saw a life one that had chosen right, in a world full of wrong commands. Day 2 of the hearing. Media swarmed the Fort Meade perimeter. Reporters jostled for angles, headlines already typed and waiting. Warrior or weapon? Ray 3, the dog who disobeyed to save lives. Is memory enough to prove humanity? Inside the courtroom, soft golden light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the witness rows. Caleb sat upright. Lila clutched her binder of notes. Echo lay beside him. No muzzle, no chain, just a soft silver fabric leash symbol of complete trust. General Croft tapped his gavel. We proceed. As requested, today will include a live demonstration to assess the reflexes and independent behavioral adaptation of subject RAE 3. A hush swept through the audience. Seated beside Croft was Margaret Elridge, senior official from the National Security Office, famous for rejecting no fewer than 10 experimental weapons projects. She would give the final recommendation. Caleb stepped to the center of the floor. His eyes paused at every corner: cameras, officers, ethics advisors, and Vernon Hale coldly folded in the back. He didn't speak. He simply tapped 3 times on his left wrist, the signal once used between battlefield brothers. Echo raised his head. Not hurried, not panicked. He waited. Caleb didn't look at him, gave no further cue, just stood still. 1 beat? 2 beats? Echo rose, circled behind Caleb, positioned himself for cover eyes, scanning all angles. Perfect execution, tactical precision. Then Caleb tapped twice short. Echo crouched low to the right side. Still, no panting, no anticipation of reward. Just waiting for the next mission. No one moved. No yelling, no coercion, no clickers, no collars, only connection. Caleb tapped once, soft. Echo lifted his head, walked toward the witness bench where Margaret Elridge sat. The room held its breath. Echo stopped, sat up, and gently raised his right paw to touch her shoe, a gesture known in rescue units as, "I found it." No one had taught him that today. But somehow, he knew what to do, and chose to do it. Elridge looked down. Her eyes were old, but sharp as surgical steel. Then she looked up. "We call him a tool," she said. The room was silent. "We think implants, reflex loops, and memory wipes can turn a living being into a piece of tech. But tech doesn't disobey orders to save lives. Tools don't wait for a heartbeat instead of a command. And no chip in the world can program these eyes." She placed her hand gently on Echo's head. The eyes of a soldier. A pen scratched across paper. Elridge signed the form, Ray 3, officially recognized as a service member with full recovery rights and combat honors. Applause erupted from a far corner where the old veterans sat like faded ghosts. Echo didn't wag his tail. He didn't need to. He had done the last thing he ever needed to do, prove that he wasn't just evidence. He was alive. Early morning, dew still clung to the wild grass growing along the wooden fence. First light streamed through the pines, glinting off the old red tin roof of the apiary, a place that was once Caleb's quiet retreat, now marked by a new wooden sign, its letters burnt deep into the grain. Sanctuary 1, where warriors come to find themselves. Echo lay on the porch step, head resting on his front paws, eyes half closed. The burn wounds along his back had begun to scab over. The charred fur was slowly growing back. The last dressing had come off the day before. But no one here saw him as a patient anymore. He was the gatekeeper, the first soul of Sanctuary 1. Caleb stepped out from the kitchen cabin, holding a mug of strong black coffee, looking at Echo like one would a fellow soldier, someone who'd walked the same battlefield. No words were needed. They understood each other. "Day 2, buddy," he murmured. Day 1 was when Echo woke from near death and licked Caleb's hand during an IV drip. Day 2 was when the sanctuary received its first guest. A beige truck pulled up at 9 a.m. The back door swung open, revealing a gaunt Malinois, claws worn to stumps, eyes blank. Beside him was a young woman in a faded combat medic uniform she'd once served in Syria. "His name's Max," she said. "Left behind after the blast. No one came for him." Echo stood, walking slowly toward them. Caleb held his breath, ready to step in if Max reacted. But Echo stopped in front of the dog, sniffed gently around him, then turned and lay down. Max didn't bark, didn't flinch. Slowly, he lowered himself next to Echo, resting his head against Echo's belly, as if trying to find a heartbeat he used to know. Caleb nodded. It was the nod of someone who had seen miracles. No science needed. By noon, an elderly couple arrived with Rusty, a retired German shepherd who had served on the southern border. Their voices trembled. "We can't take care of him anymore. He won't eat, just growls at mirrors." Caleb knelt, not approaching Rusty. He simply said, "No one here needs you to be good or obedient. All we ask is that you keep breathing." And for the first time in months, Rusty lifted his head. By sunset, 3 new hay-lined beds had been laid in the yard. Echo no longer slept in the kennel. He rested in the middle of the open space like a sentry. The young pup still curled up at his tail, unaware of what he had seen. Rusty now lay under the porch, eyes open, but no longer afraid. That night, Caleb wrote in his journal, "Echo doesn't need to do anything to be called a hero. He just needs to be here, and the rest begin to heal themselves." Lila visited late that evening. She brought 2 bags of veterinary meds and a framed photo. It was the picture from the hearing Echo placing his paw gently on Margaret Elridge's shoe. She hung it in the main cabin, beneath a new inscription. What was once called a tool is now a warrior and a teacher. That night, Echo didn't sleep deeply. He stared toward the forest. Once the last darkness he ran into, under rain and thunder, with the past chasing at his heels. But he didn't run anymore. He stayed, and in that staying forgotten warriors began to return. That afternoon, a gentle breeze rolled through red pines. The bees flew quietly. The dry netting was being replaced after the last honey season. Caleb sat beside a dog named Bishop, just arrived from Arizona. It was a season of recovery. Everything felt like it was settling into a fragile kind of peace, until the unmarked envelope appeared in the wooden mailbox by the gate. No sender, no postage stamp, just one word, bolded and italicized on the flap. "Don't let it happen again." Caleb opened it. Inside was a single sheet of laser-printed paper. No handwriting. The tone was short, cold, but carried a fear barely held in check, written by someone silenced for far too long. "I once served under Hale. Thought I was just another cog until Titan Protocol was shut down and I was reassigned to a facility in Eastern Europe. There, I saw horrors worse than neural testing. What they're building now is a perfect copy. No chip, no training, just reactivation of core genetic memory. The new program is called Project RAE. Caleb froze. His hand crumpled the edge of the page. RAE. The name that had haunted Echo like a burn seared into his brain. A genetic sequence, a designation, an identity stolen and reprogrammed. He looked over at Echo dozing in the sun a few yards away. No reaction. Until the breeze flipped up the edge of the letter. The faint rustle of paper sounded. Echo's eyes snapped open. His ears twitched. Then he let out a low, guttural growl, deep, primal. Caleb lifted the letter. Project RAE, he said aloud. Echo shot to his feet as if electrocuted. No barking, no howling, just trembling. His throat emitted a choked rasp, like an old respirator. His eyes widened, not in alertness, but in terror. Lila arrived just in time to see it. He's reacting just like he did the first time you mentioned his old code, she whispered. Caleb nodded, handing her the letter. Lila scanned it. Her face went pale. Reactivation via core genetics. They want to clone combat instinct. No training, no love. Just orders. Hard-coded in DNA. Caleb looked up. Sunlight slanted across Echo's back. The body that had been burned, chipped, that had defied commands to save a life. And now, that same body might become the prototype for a new generation of biological weapons. He's no longer a living being. He's a formula. Echo didn't stand anymore. He backed away a few steps, then dropped, panting heavily like the onset of another PTSD wave. But his eyes were sharp, strangely sharp. Lila murmured, "He understands. No translation needed. He knows. The one who created the nightmare is coming back." That entire afternoon, Echo didn't eat, didn't sleep. He just lay there, eyes fixed on the woods, where black birds sometimes darted through like unspoken warnings. Caleb locked the letter in the safe, but he knew silence didn't mean safety. An old ghost was lurking, and Echo's journey may not end at Red Pines after all. Late autumn rain fell gently over Montana, not heavy, but persistent, like a reminder of memories that wouldn't dry. In the wood kitchen of Sanctuary 1, Caleb was reorganizing the file cabinet when the phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered, "Caleb Merrick? This is General Bennington, Special Tactical Command. We've closely followed your disclosure of the Titan Protocol. We're deeply impressed with the recovery of Subject RAE-3. Caleb said nothing. Outside, he heard Echo's soft footsteps on the porch light, like a ghost that had learned how not to be heard. "I'll be direct. We're restructuring the ethical framework for military K-9 training, this time under UN oversight. We want you to be our chief advisor." Caleb looked out the window. Echo sat in the yard. The pups nestled against his belly in their sleep. At the edge of the yard, Rusty, once the most traumatized, no longer growled when approached. Max was eating on schedule. He didn't answer right away. The general continued, "We understand this is a hard offer to refuse. High salary, full autonomy in writing the new protocol. You could help thousands of lives." Caleb closed his eyes. Thousands of lives? He thought of every pair of eyes that had stared at him through sleepless nights. Dogs who couldn't speak their pain, who only whimpered at the sight of a uniform, or buried themselves in corners at the sound of a whistle. He opened his eyes and said softly, "I decline." Silence on the other end. "Are you sure? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Caleb smiled, not bitterly, not regretfully. "Exactly. That's why I won't miss the one I already have." He hung up. The kitchen door creaked open. Echo stepped in. No noise, no wagging. He simply sat beside Caleb, resting his head on his leg as if he understood everything. No words needed. Caleb stroked the newly grown fur over Echo's healed burns. "I used to think doing the right thing meant fixing the system. But now I see. Sometimes the right thing is staying where no system exists yet, and standing guard for those who have none." That evening, Lila asked, "You're not leaving?" Caleb shook his head. "There's still too much here that hasn't healed. Echo needs me, and I need him." She didn't press further, just smiled. Together they looked out at the yard where the dogs slept under the eaves. On the back wall, the intake list had 2 new names pinned, and beneath the sign that read, "Sanctuary 1. We don't ask why you came, only if you want to stay." Caleb added a single line with a black marker, slightly crooked but firm. "I choose to stay." Early morning. Sunlight filtered through the thin wooden blinds, spreading across the western wall of Sanctuary 1. The main room, once an old honey storage shed, had become a hall of remembrance. Every photo hanging there wasn't just a captured moment, but a living story of 4-legged warriors who had walked the line between shadow and light. Echo lay near the windowsill, his eyes quietly following Caleb as he adjusted the 12th frame. The photo was striking, centered on the wall. The background was ablaze with fire. A truck engulfed in smoke, red flames licking the metal frame, casting a glow over scorched grass. In the foreground, Echo, gently gripping the collar of a puppy in his mouth, another nestled beneath his belly. His coat was singed, eyes wide but not fearful, only blazing with an instinct to save, as fierce as the flames surrounding him. Below the photo, the engraved words read, "Echo, the one who did not flee the fire, but walked into it to save what still had life." Caleb stood in silence for a long time. The image was printed on pine wood, darkened edges. The nails held firm, but didn't cover the scorch mark on the right edge. A burn Echo had left behind, still faintly scented with smoke. Behind him, the clack of paws echoed. Rusty, Max, Luna, and 4 new pups, recently brought in from a disbanded southern unit, entered in quiet succession. All of them turned to Echo. No commands, no training. They simply sat around him. Echo didn't look back. He just lifted his head slightly, then rested it again on the wooden floor, a signal long understood at the sanctuary. Safe. Stay. Caleb sat down beside him. "You know," he whispered, like speaking to an old comrade. "The day you got here, I wasn't sure if you'd ever walk out of your own past." He paused, looked up at the portrait. "But now it seems you're the one leading those who haven't yet found the way." The printer whirred from the back room. Lila was preparing intake files for 3 dogs from a dissolved Oregon facility. Caleb chuckled quietly. "Sanctuary 1's getting crowded, buddy." Echo didn't react. He was watching the front porch where a pup was clumsily trying to cross a makeshift wooden bridge. It slipped, then froze, growling nervously. Echo stood up. Not fast, not rushed, just enough to draw attention. He walked onto the porch, approached the pup, ducked under the bridge, and lay beneath it. From above, the little dog saw the broad form of Echo lying beneath its paws, a foundation, a back ready to support if it fell. And it continued, no longer hesitant. Caleb squinted, said nothing. Lila had joined him. She smiled. He doesn't need training anymore. Now, he's training us. Caleb nodded. In the pale morning light, they watched Echo not as a soldier in combat, but as one who passes on the flame. A new photo was hung, but the legacy lived in the way Echo watched each soul that came after and never looked away until they found their path. That afternoon, Montana was bathed in golden sunlight. The grassy hill behind Sanctuary 1 had been cleared early, flags set, and a temporary pine stage erected. A light breeze carried the scent of honey and damp earth from last night's rain. At the center of the hill, a white stone plaque had been raised engraved with, "In honor of the nameless warriors, those who served, who fell, and were forgotten." Beneath it were 47 names, code names, numbers, each restored from deleted records through the efforts of Caleb, Lila, and a group of veterans from Titan Unit. To the left of the stage, rows of seats had been arranged for veterans. Many brought their dogs or faded portraits. Some eyes were red, some hands clutched worn Marine caps as if unwilling to let go. To the right reserved for the dogs, Rusty, Max, Luna, Bishop, and many others who had recovered at Sanctuary 1, sat in a line, no leashes, no commands. They knew this was for their fallen kind. Echo didn't sit with the others. He stood alone beside the flagpole. That muscular frame now bore scars, his thicker coat unable to hide the old burn on his right flank. His eyes didn't look down, not at people, but straight up at the American flag fluttering in the wind, beside a smaller flag embroidered with a paw print. Caleb stepped onto the stage. He held a written speech, but standing before the mic, he didn't open it. His voice was low, steady, but drawn from deep within his chest. When I served, they used to say, "The battlefield chooses who deserves to survive." I believed that once, until a warrior, no name, no weapon, no voice walked through fire to save something more worthy than himself. He paused. His eyes turned to Echo. We don't honor animals today. We honor soldiers who were never recognized. We don't mourn the past. We remind ourselves of the duty we carry now. We don't recount heroics. We engrave a loyalty that asked for nothing in return. Heads bowed. There were sniffles. Salutes raised, not for protocol, but for an emotional debt long left unspoken. A trumpet played taps, the traditional soldier's farewell. Echo didn't move. He stood still, every muscle frozen like stone, tongue in, eyes wide open. As the final note rang out, the American flag was lowered to half-mast. Only then did Echo lift his head a little higher. No commands, no instructions, no ceremony, but everyone knew it was his own ritual. Lila stepped onto the stage, holding a red ribbon, bending down to tie it around Echo's neck-embroidered words. Keeper of memory. No medals needed. No grand speeches. Just Echo standing there was enough. After the ceremony, no one left right away. They approached the memorial plaque, leaving behind old leashes, chipped arrow tags, bone-shaped keychains, once meaningless trinkets, now quiet apologies long overdue. Echo was gone from the hill. He had slipped away, as silently as he arrived. Caleb knew he didn't stay for praise. He stayed so no one else would be forgotten. Early morning mist clung to the trail leading into the pine woods behind the sanctuary. Echo stretched out on the cool earth, eyes half closed, ears twitching to every sound. Caleb stepped out from the main office, followed by a young man, tall, lean, backpack slung over one shoulder, cap pulled low. His name was Micah, a returnee from the Kandahar campaign, just 25. But his eyes carried the fatigue of someone who had walked too far. He limped, not from a physical wound, but from a mind still unable to walk straight after what it had seen. Caleb didn't say much, just gestured for Micah to follow him to the back of the sanctuary where wooden benches overlooked the valley. Echo lay there still, unmoving, but eyes open. "What should I do?" Micah whispered, hand gripping his backpack strap. "Nothing," Caleb replied. "Just stand still." He stood, tense, watching Echo. Echo didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't retreat. He simply stood up. Each step slow, each paw fall light as if afraid to disturb the other's breath. The wind tousled his fur, the scar on his side still raw. Micah instinctively stepped back. His hands trembled. Caleb didn't interfere. Echo stopped exactly 2 arm lengths away. No advance, no retreat. He sat, silent, eyes locked on the young soldier. No sound. Yet something inside melted. Micah gasped, then dropped to a crouch, bracing himself on his knees, eyes welling up. I didn't think anyone could trust me again." His voice faltered. Echo inched forward, half a step. No touch, no overbearing comfort, just enough for the boy to feel he wasn't alone. Caleb remained behind, letting the moment breathe. He had seen this before, not just once, and each time it healed differently. He stepped forward, gently resting a hand on Micah's shoulder, light as air. "If he chooses to stay by you, you're going to be all right." Micah looked up. Echo was still there, eyes speaking volumes about war's fractures without judgment, just waiting for him to be ready. That day, Micah was assigned to the southern room, the one that used to be Caleb's. It was now reserved for those starting over. Caleb no longer needed a private space. He slept near the kennels with Echo, and the ones still finding their voices. At night, under the soft porch light, Echo lay at the steps, Micah beside him. No words, only the wind and shared breath of 2 survivors learning not to fear warmth. Sanctuary 1 never advertised, no signposts, but those who needed it always found their way. Because there, a dog didn't need to bark, didn't need to bite, didn't need to be called a hero. He only had to sit beside a broken soul and, through silence alone, say, "I understand." Some stories don't end with applause. They don't need dazzling fireworks. They close quietly, with a steady breath, a knowing glance, or a dog sitting silently beside someone who's never truly been held. Echo's story, a German shepherd bearing the scars of war, is one of those stories. It begins at the lowest rung of the life cycle, a silent auction, where living beings are reduced to starting bids. A dog who once ran into fire for his team, now labeled damaged, crazy, a corpse on 4 legs. People laughed, dismissed, turned away. And then one man stood up, not to save the world, not to be a hero, but simply to do the right thing, for a soul that had no one left to do right by it. From that moment began a journey, not just to heal Echo, but to rescue us from indifference, from forgetting, from the numbness we've built around invisible pain. In a dog's world, there is no such thing as an unforgivable past. Echo, despite being broken, abused by an unethical training system, still chose to protect, still ran into fire to save a life, still sat beside a young veteran trembling in the grip of panic. No hatred, no calculation, only the instinct to love, and a loyalty that asks for nothing in return. It makes us ask, which species truly deserves to be called higher? The German Shepherd has long been known for its intelligence, loyalty, and courage. These dogs are first-choice recruits for police forces, military units, rescue missions, and PTSD therapy. Echo isn't fictional. He is a distilled truth, a symbol drawn from thousands of real stories, of dogs who've pulled people from burning buildings, detected bombs before they exploded, dragged bodies from the rubble, or simply sat beside a veteran who hadn't slept in weeks. They don't ask for medals, but they deserve to be understood. In this modern world, we love dogs more than ever, but often forget. To love a creature isn't about fancy crates, premium food, or calling them baby. Love is listening without expecting anything back, giving space to heal instead of demanding instant obedience, waiting hours in a parking lot like Caleb did, just to let Echo take the step on his own. No leash, no command, only time, only trust. We've hurt too many animals just because they didn't act the way we wanted. Echo teaches us a different kind of love, a way to begin again, no matter how dark the past has been. Echo never gave speeches. He didn't bow or write memoirs. But he changed the lives of Caleb, of Micah, of countless other veterans. He triggered investigations into entire military units, saved dozens of other dogs from being destroyed, forced society to reconsider the meaning of words like valor, loyalty, sacrifice. Because sometimes what makes the world better isn't victory, but the quiet decision to do what's right, even after being abandoned time and again. Echo never spoke, but every paw print he left behind said to us, "Be better, not because I deserve it, but because you can." Sanctuary. One may be fictional, but what it represents is real homes that shelter rescue dogs, war dogs, discarded dogs, dogs no one calls by name anymore. If you've made it this far, please don't just feel moved. Act. Visit a rescue center. Consider adopting before buying. Support organizations that train therapy dogs for veterans and people with PTSD. Teach your children empathy every time they gently pet a silent creature. And if you ever meet a dog labeled difficult, useless, broken, remember, Echo, what you're looking at might be a warrior, still waiting for a second chance, because no one is born to be forgotten, and no one has to be human to teach us how to love. Echo did, not with words, but simply by sitting beside someone who just needed someone to sit with.